Welcome again to another edition of the Southwest Climate Podcast. Take two.
Take two.
The first take, Mike, I have to admit, that was 5 minutes of complete dribble.
Yeah. All right, I helped.
But this is take two, and I think we're better. We're better this time.
Okay.
So thanks again for tuning in. We're in the end of March edition. The last time we came at you, I believe, was right before the only precipitation event to talk about, really, since the winter began, middle of February. We'll deconstruct that a little bit. We'll go back, recap the winter, because the winter is, in my mind, kind of in the rearview mirror.
You're done with it. You're already moving on.
Well, you know, we had our first 90-degree temperature day, which, in my mind, is the beginning of the official spring period, summer period, maybe.
Okay.
What do you think?
It sounds good to me. All right. Winter's the new spring.
Winter's the new spring. Summer. What does that make?
I don't know. You don't want to know.
Summer's the new.
Summer's the new
Death
season.
Valley.
I guess. I don't know. We have to come up with
the Tucson summer is the new Phoenix summer.
Oh,
or the old Phoenix summer, and the new Phoenix summer is the old Death Valley.
Head
whatever.
Spin. You're making my head spin.
We're gonna have to do take three. Okay, so
no, just keep going. Keep going. Just push.
All right. So let's recap. So what happened in the last month? It's basically been one event.
For Tucson, we hadn't had much to talk about. I think you and I, when we were talking in mid-February, just as the clouds were starting to build and the weather was starting to shift, had a handful of events. We're looking at just a little over a half inch of total winter precip in Tucson at that point, and it was looking pretty bleak.
Up until about mid-February, February 15th, I believe.
Valentine's Day. We had that little click over in the weather, and the pattern really did change. And that event stands out.
What do you mean the pattern changed?
Well, we had been in that more typical La Niña pattern. We had a sort of broad ridge, very warm temperatures in much of January, much of early February. The storm track was far to the north. We had sort of sunny days on end and weren't really looking at much precipitation, didn't have any moisture to work with. Was kind of a classic La Niña pattern up until that point, until the weather did start to break down. That ridge started to break down. There was a couple of interesting things happening in the northern hemisphere at that point. There was Madden-Julian oscillation was quite active through January and February. La Niña was in play. There was a lot of expectation for the sudden stratospheric warming events, which we've talked about in the past.
By the way, both tropical phenomenons.
MJO, Madden-Julian oscillation, and La Niña, absolutely. Sudden stratospheric warming at the poles. So the forecasters who are really looking at the polar vortex and trying to see some shifts in the eastern United States and then what would happen in Europe were kind of focused on if the polar vortex was going to wobble out of place. It actually split. The vortex did end up splitting.
Vortex split?
Vortex split, yes.
I don't know what to make of that.
So the polar vortex broke in two. It'll go back together. You look concerned. You look like, don't worry, it's back together. It sounds pretty terrible.
Some narratives, that's like apocalyptic, maybe?
Yeah, well, it wasn't that bad. But anyways, that thing, the polar vortex splitting in two, and having two lobes of cold air, one wandering over towards Europe, one actually retrograded westward and started to cause our broad west-wide trough to set up prior to the wet event. The following week after our wet event in mid-February it got cool, and we actually started to pick up a little bit of snow in Arizona in that period.
Yeah, let's back it up because you said
a lot of pieces.
Yeah,
a lot
you
of
got
parts.
the MJO, we got the La Niña, we got the sudden stratospheric warming, we got the polar vortex. All these things are sort of
MJO, ENSO, SSW, PO.
Wow.
Yep.
All going on. What about the PDO? AMO?
Why not? Throw it in there. Yeah, absolutely.
Quasi-biennial oscillation?
QBO, go for it.
All right. So all of these things are going on.
Yes.
And up until sort of mid-February, as you say, we were in sort of a ridge
broad western ridge.
Which helped to divert whatever the storm track was at that time, whatever was sort of wafting in from the northern regions.
A lot of wafting. Yes, a lot of wafting.
Was being pushed north.
Yes.
So while we were dry and warm, Pacific Northwest was...
Even a little further north.
North was sort of wet.
Yeah, and then the storm track would enter into the northern Rockies and then through far northern Rockies and northern plains. And so they ended up... We'll talk a little later about snowpack. The snowpack in the far northern Rockies, Montana, a little bit of Idaho, yeah, that's so bad. Actually picked up quite a bit of snow, but everybody south and west of there in dry.
Okay, so then what broke down that ridge pattern through mid-February?
It seems to be, again, a bunch of pieces. The La Niña was weakening at that point. The MJO was moving through its different phases, Mad-Julian oscillation, which was exerting a lot of influence on the broader scale jet stream pattern. And then this polar vortex split caused two lobes at, again, this is the top of the planet, if you're sort of, think of it in that terms, caused one of those lobes to retrograde and push down a broad long wave trough across the western U.S.
So then we were sort of over a trough.
So it's like the whole jet stream pattern gets sort of knocked out of the position it had been persisting in prior to that, which was good. It really shifted everything around.
So it seemed to me when I looked at the weather maps that we were by and large over the last month, a little bit over a month, we had been in this sort of trough pattern. Many sort of low pressures were sort of wafting through our region, and yet basically we only got one event. I mean, it was a big event. We should talk about that.
Yep.
But nothing more from that sort of active jet pattern.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of late winter Arizona where you're really working hard to try to draw moisture into the region to be able to work with. So you're absolutely right. I think it's been busy weather-wise with an active progressive jet stream across the west, but parts of Arizona haven't fared as well. But it's been interesting. It's been kind of shifting on and off where the northern part of the state has had several events, none of them real big, very wet ones, but colder and a little bit more snow, more frequent precip across far northern. And then southern Arizona has really been left out of that, except for the first event, which was a multi-day soaker with high snow levels higher than most of the Sky Islands that set off was at the beginning of this period since our last podcast.
Let's go back a little bit. So this February, mid-February, it started over about 24 hours of precip. Up until that point in Tucson, if you look at the October through that point in time, total precipitation, it would be on average about 3 inches.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we had to that moment only about a half an inch. So obviously huge deficits there. And that event itself brought about 1.25 inches.
From when we were sitting in that podcast, and the forecasts were really uncertain at that point too. They're kind of all over the place. It was whether or not this plume of subtropical moisture was actually going to get drawn up into Arizona, whether it was going to produce precipitation. It's really started to consolidate as we got up on the event. But most of the forecasts underestimated the actual precip totals and the extent, both in mostly in duration, about what happened over those next couple of days.
And I should say 1.25 inches at the airport. But if you look, broader, even on top of Mount Lemmon, I think they got close to 10 inches of
over
rain.
a multi-day totals.
The higher elevations. Now you said something that was important, which is that this was a warm storm, so there wasn't a lot of snow.
No.
In fact, was that event? I don't think that event produced much snow.
It didn't produce any snow until the very tail end when the cold air started to filter in. It was a really interesting event because the multi-day precip totals were pretty big. I mean, there was over, I think, close to 2 inches for Tucson proper with that event. And then across the region, it was 3, 4, 6, and 7 inch totals across southern Arizona. But there was very little hydrological response in any of the washes or streams right at the event. It was just such a protracted, gentle rain over multiple days that everything just soaked up. And so I've been hiking around the region, and there's still water flowing from that event 6 weeks ago.
And it was relatively confined to the southwest part.
Yeah, it was a real narrow.
I mean, you look at Phoenix. Phoenix got just a bit, 1/4 inch.
Yeah, it had a real hard edge to it to the north, and it was oriented from southwest to northeast across the region. And some of it extended up into New Mexico. Albuquerque got a little bit out of this event, but nothing like we saw across southeast Arizona.
Okay, so this was tapping, obviously subtropical rain. Now, I don't know if this is controversial with you, Mike, because I know how you feel, but I have seen this as classified as an atmospheric river event.
Right.
What's your feeling on that?
You had to bring it up.
I did.
I know. This was the setup, wasn't it? Right here. I knew this was coming.
Should we talk a little bit about atmospheric river?
I think you should. Why do you care so much? That's what I want to know.
Well, I've got nothing to say. I actually don't care if it's classified as an atmospheric river event. I think it's a colorful term. I mean, I like the imagery of thinking about a river in the sky.
I like it too. Yeah.
Atmospheric rivers they tend to bring, at least for California and in the West Coast, Oregon and Washington, these are the events that bring the greatest amounts of precipitation, that bring the greatest negative impacts, the floods, the torrential downpours. Actually, we just had an atmospheric river a couple days ago in California that brought a lot of rain there.
We're discussing a really nice post-event summary on the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes, which is run out of UC San Diego Scripps, and they've got a nice write-up on it. And they classified it as an atmospheric river event. What I thought was really interesting about this event was, and you could even see this coming when we were approaching the event, and then you would look at where the moisture was coming from. The moisture plume wasn't that sort of typical long ribbon of moisture you see extending out past Hawaii or connecting up to the Western Pacific, all the way across the Pacific. This was this kind of short, stubby track from the Eastern Pacific, from this plume of moisture that was coming out of the easterlies across from the Atlantic. So it was like this track in the easterlies across Central America into the Eastern Pacific, and was getting drawn up around this ridge off to the east, and then as this approaching trough to the west was coming in, drew up. So it looked like the sort of classic where you'd see monsoon moisture move in the summertime. It wasn't that mechanism at all, or even similar, but it was kind of an interesting approach. It was very southerly stream of East Pacific subtropical moisture that was, pretty narrow and pretty strong, and interacted with some really very weak dynamics that were present at the time. But there was also a block upstream that kept this just correct orientation of moisture flowing into the region for multiple days, and just kept round of shower after shower after shower happening across the region. And so the totals stacked up. So it didn't, to me, feel like an AR in the sense of those California ones where it's just like, boom, they're getting 10 inches of rain in a very short amount of time. We did get 10 inches of rain on the top of the mountains here over a multi-day period. But again, the intensity of the rainfall was pretty light, and it was all beneficial. No flooding, no impacts.
I mean, we talked about this last year, I think, a fair amount on the podcast, because I think that was a really active year for atmospheric rivers, particularly in California.
Yeah,
I think on average, around 10 to 15 atmospheric rivers strike the West Coast. And they are important features for California, Oregon, and Washington, because they do bring large volumes of rain over a long period of time, and they tap subtropical moisture. And they're less important here for us, in part because I think of what you said a minute ago, which is it takes a particular kind of orientation for those rivers coming in from the West Coast to actually make it through the coastal topography. They have to sort of thread the needle in the south here, get over the Sierra Nevadas, and that doesn't happen very often.
No, we're inland, and so it really is tricky getting across the coastal range of Baja even to get some of that deep subtropical moisture in here. Those coastal ranges really can interact with moisture coming in and squeegee out a lot of that moisture coming in.
Okay, so anything else to say about that February 15th, 16th event?
You said it earlier. We have to just make sure if you're in Tucson, it kind of made the winter. It really took a lot of sort of emotional stress off of a lot of us who had been like, how are we going to make it through the rest of this winter? Looking forward, we were really concerned that we were going to end up with a 2002 kind of drought situation, or a 2005-06 situation. And so it really, I think, was an important slug of moisture to put some fire risk at bay. It's turned into some water resources for wildlife. You can see some water kind of working around. I think it was really important. But as you said earlier, it was really localized, and it was very confined to the southeast part of the state. Much of New Mexico didn't get as much out of this as we did here in southeast Arizona, and the rest of Arizona is still in really bad shape as far as drought conditions going forward.
So to put it in context, that one event produced about, so far, from October 1 through the end of March, close to 50% of our rain. So just one event.
Yeah, and that was over a matter of days, right?
drawing on your memory here, but if it stays like this and one event produces 50% of the rain, is that a pretty unusual situation that you would get that fraction of rain and just that fraction of the winter rain in just one event? I mean, it seems like that's a fairly uncommon situation.
I'd have to poke at the historical plots a little bit more. I think it's rare, but it's not unprecedented. It seems like that is something that we had talked about. This was there going to be an event like this, and there just happened to be an event like this, right? So I think we all kind of in the back of our mind said, it could turn around on a dime because of a run like this. And that kind of run where you get multiple days of good, decent precip happens more frequently in an El Nino year than it would, say, in a La Nina year like we would have here. So I think, to me, it's a standout in a pretty decent La Nina year up to that point.
Okay, so the broader sort of regional context here, again, since October 1, start of the water year, through the end of March, nearly all of Arizona has experienced less than 50% of its rain. California as well, for the most part, is faring similar, maybe a little bit better, in part because of this last storm over last weekend, actually.
Right.
Delivered quite a bit of rainfall to coastal California. Utah, Colorado, Nevada, and California, and south of that is basically dry this winter. And you have to go up to the central northern Rockies, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, Washington for rainfall to be above average.
Yeah, it's got a La Nina-ish look to it as far as the precip anomalies. If you look across the continental U.S., it's interesting that this would have looked so much more La Nina-like if we wouldn't have had that February event. So it's like that February event carved this little nook out of southeast Arizona and southwest New Mexico that put, if you look at the anomalies over the last 2 months, put us to average to slightly above average.
If you zoom in and just look at a shorter time window,
it does sort of show up. Yeah, and then if you back out, there's still, it took a little bit of pressure off of that region, parts of Arizona and New Mexico with that event.
Okay, so the precip pattern, again, if you sort of look over the last 5 months or so, 4 months or so, the precip pattern does look La Nina-ish. And were the dynamics?
Yeah.
Dynamics were in.
Yeah,
in
and again,
as
I think there was a lot of those pieces and parts. There's some good blog posts on climate.gov on their ENSO blog that are sort of trying to talk and parse some of the different mechanisms at play. So they, kind of a background La Nina state, Julian oscillation sort of operating on top of it, sort of constructively and destructively interfering with it at times over that period of time. And then I think more recently, that polar vortex split did end up disrupting the jet stream pattern and knocking stuff a little bit out of whack. The pattern shift that we've had over the last month has been a little bit more favorable for bringing some of that precip a little bit further south. You've seen some of the upper basin pick up a little bit more snow that they weren't getting earlier on. And then a little bit of precip even this far south into the southwest. So that shakeup has been important over the last 30 days. But it has not in any way changed the drought conditions all that substantially here in the southwest that have accumulated over the last 6 months. We're not out of the woods at all. Most of the southwest is in pretty bad shape. February event was important, I think, for just putting some of that fire risk at far southern Arizona and parts of New Mexico at bay for a little while.
The snow pattern across the west mimics the sort of precipitation pattern.
It's just rough.
Northern Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, slightly above average.
Yeah, kind of your La Nina break point, right?
Yeah,
in the
and then everywhere
Rockies.
else. And this is actually upcoming to the April 1 is sort of the peak snowpack. And the date in which a lot of these streamflow forecasts are queued to. And it also kind of marks the end of the snow accumulation season for the most part. For southern parts. And obviously, like in the higher countries, you're still going to get some snowpack, but the majority of it is, again, in the rearview mirror.
Absolutely. For Arizona, it's March 1st is a better peak snowpack date, and then April 1st as you kind of get up into the Utah, Colorado, and further north. And just like you said, you can get even more after that, but that we've already crossed March 1st, so Arizona snowpack is toast. What we have is we don't have much is all we're going to deal with. So that's kind of baked in, but I think you're right. As you go further north, it's just not a lot better over the upper basin.
Some of the other things to note, if you look at California as a whole, I think it's running at about 50% of its long-term average in terms of snowpack, and a fair amount of that, maybe a quarter of that, came in the last storm. So Just another finer point on this snowpack situation across the West. If you look at the sort of the extremes and sort of filter by record driest and record wettest, there's, about 10 to 1 more record dry stations than there are wet stations. And so that's, that pretty much sums up the winter so far. It's been pretty bleak for much of the southern half of the West.
Right. How did the streamflow forecast look?
Streamflow forecasts, as you can imagine, have a similar picture, Mike.
What? How is that possible?
Well, because it's all driven by snow.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, so the important ones that we pay attention to, or that I'm going to talk about here, is the inflow into Lake Powell. Obviously, that's big for the Colorado River. The best estimate is about 43% of average stream flow for the April through July period. So that's a pretty low scenario. Turns out that the reservoir storage in Lake Powell and Meade is actually higher this year than it was last year, but that reflects the relatively wet winter that they had in the Upper Basin last year. Okay. So in addition to Lake Powell, Rio Grande's not looking rosy as well. So inflow into Ottawee Bridge, which helps us determine what the inflow into Elephant Butte Reservoir will be like. The projection for the March through July period is about 25% of average. So that's a pretty dire situation there. Another bit of information is it's been the driest start to the water year in Albuquerque since 95-96, third driest over the last century. So again, this is the picture is consistent across the Southwest, and I think we've hit this home. You could look at the metrics of drought, like droughts expanded. I think the U.S. Drought Monitor calls for Arizona about 85% of the state is at severe drought or more. 35% is at extreme drought. So the low precipitation, Mike, is the story of this winter.
That one event in February, which it was extraordinary. It really was extraordinary. The amount of precip over that multi-day period, how warm that storm was, how high the snow levels were. It was a really strange February event to have, and I think it was a huge lifeline to southern Arizona to really knock back some of the local drought conditions. But again, it was so isolated, it didn't impact the broader Southwest area.
So April, what can we expect from April?
What do you think?
It's going to increasingly get warm. Very little chance of rain.
There'll be longer days.
Days.
Right? It can rain and snow in Arizona in April. It can happen. Does it happen every year? No. Has it happened in the past? Yes.
It looks bleak for the short term, though, over the next 10 days.
It's funny. I've been watching the 6 to 10 day forecast and the 8 to 14 day on the Climate Prediction Center, and it's been all over the place. And it's been really interesting because it was very dry, and it's over the last couple of days it's backed off, and I think there's quite a bit more uncertainty that's gone back into the forecast. And the 1 month forecast still has that dry anomaly across the Southwest. It's still fairly noisy spring out there. And I expect that we will see 1, maybe 2 more events in Arizona, and maybe even some precip this far south. I don't think it's done yet.
I'm calling it.
You're not buying it.
It.
I knew you'd call it. I totally knew.
Winter's over.
Whatever.
No more rain. No more rain.
What about? Did you win? Did you win that?
No,
bet?
we didn't.
I had to bring that up.
Yeah, we didn't. I didn't win.
I
think we went back and checked, and I think Mike, you projected.
Pretty sure I was
December through March.
I think I did say that. Ben checked the tapes.
Yeah, and I think for Tucson,
73.5.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think I was right. Yeah.
And I was optimistic, Mike.
It's nice to be under. That's what I like about this.
Win. I just needed one more event. I'm not asking for a lot. Just one more February 17. Yeah. Double February 17, and
did you see what it took for me though to win? I had to have some epic atmospheric river come up here and slam the Southwest.
At this point of year, it's kind of not that valuable to talk about El Nino or La Niña, even though La Niña is sort of on its way out. It doesn't exert a lot of control over obviously, because we don't get a lot of weather in April and May and June and even into
monsoon countdown.
Yeah, even into the monsoon season. So, we tend to, or at least I tend to.
You check out?
Yeah, I
this
check
is usually
out
when you leave the country, right?
I check out of INSO.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to say about INSO?
Nah, I don't care. No, it's La Niña seems to be over. Yeah. I think Climate Prediction Center is starting to call it. The forecasts are back to neutral. They sort of trend up, and the plumes go all over the place for the summer. So we kind of are back to not knowing where we're headed.
It's dry here, so a below average or an above average forecast. Well, a below average forecast is kind of pointless, which is what it was before.
Yeah, I think
it's so darn dry.
Yeah, I think it's the lingering, lagging La Niña signal that Climate Prediction Center kind of leans on into the spring season. But as you say, the climatology, the precip drops pretty precipitously, to look how I use that, all right. Through the next couple of months here. So,
monsoon outlook. Should we do that now?
Oh, we got to get into.
Just kidding.
I think we have like a monsoon bracket. I'm not sure how that would work, but it sounds cool, doesn't it?
Mike, any parting shots? I'm sort of, I sort of don't have much more to add to this. I think you sort of characterized.
I can tell that we're leaning into your least favorite season here, and you're just starting to check out.
It's great weather to live in.
It's nice to go out. Yeah, we shouldn't talk about it though. Right?
It's not interesting from a sort of
podcasting perspective.
Yeah, I mean it's
we'll try.
I mean it'd take a lot of creativity for us.
You just wait.
There's going to be make the ascent of temperature exciting.
There's going to be like the April 10th snowstorm of 2018, and we will have so much to talk about.
We need to be on the East Coast. Talk about those
bomb cyclogenesis, all the made up words.
4 nor'easters, like a week apart.
I know. It's crazy. Yeah.
Man, I missed those days. Storm chasing. Okay. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll be back during the monsoon season. We're going to take an extended period break.
I just knew you were going to say that. You're going to just.
We'll be back in a month. We'll summarize what's happened.
Yeah, maybe a 10-minute podcast next month.
All right.
Should we bet on anything to
spice it up?
All right.
First, Loyola Chicago.
Oh,
you think they're gonna make the finals?
No, go blue.
Go blue. Villanova. You're a Villanova.
No, I went to Michigan. Oh, I was talking about the Loyola Chicago game. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You're a Michigan fan. That's a good team. I like Michigan. You got to root for the underdog.
Yeah, that's true.
Or if you're not from Michigan, you got to root for the underdog.
Fair enough.
Okay.
First 100-degree day.
Okay, first 100-degree. I like that. I'm gonna say April 25th.
Wow. Really?
In a month. Is that
I just want
improbable?
to step. Let's just let you.
Don't look at that. Mike guess.
Mike, yeah.
I think it's like May.
No interneting.
May 20th.
You're right. I'm a little too soon, I think. It can happen.
It can happen.
April 20th.
Earliest was April 19th.
Oh,
going extreme.
You went out in the whiskers. Nice.
When is the average?
May 25th.
May 25th. All right. Wow, you do know the climatology. Can I refine mine?
Sure, go for it.
I think it's going to be a hot spring.
Okay.
I'm going to go the first week. Maybe we should say by when. We can't predict the day. So I'm saying we're going to have the first 100-day by May 7th.
Okay.
Over the last 15, 20 years, the average
gone earlier
day has been about May 17th.
Yeah.
Previous to that, actually, it was closer to May. It was like 10 days later.
Yeah.
20 days later, 15 days later, 2 weeks later.
60s, 70s it was, yeah.
Wow, okay. Right.
What did I say? May 20th?
You said May 20th. You were right on climatology. That's pretty impressive that you pulled that out.
Now I'm pretty sure I'm going to be wrong.
You looked that up before you came. You set me up.
I totally set you up.
All right. Thanks again, Mike. Appreciate it.
See ya.
All right.
The Southwest Climate Podcast is a production of CLIMAS, which is part of NOAA's Regional Integrated Science and Assessment Program and is housed at the University of Arizona Institute of the Environment. Mike Crimmins is a principal investigator with CLIMAS, a professor of soil, water, and environmental science in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, and climate extension specialist with the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension. Zack Guido is a research scientist with the Institute of the Environment and UA program manager of the International Research and Applications Program. The podcast is edited and produced by Ben McMahon, research, outreach, and assessment specialist with CLIMAS.
River in the Sky.
Yeah, River in the Sky.
That seems like a one-hit one. That seems like that was a song in the 70s or something.
I don't know.
Okay, we'll have to go back to that.
Yeah.